Like you said, I'm a data scientist. I work for the NASA Earth Exchange, or a part of the NASA Earth Exchange. And the whole mission of NEX, as we call it, is to combine NASA's supercomputing power that they have at the Ames Research Center. So Ames houses some of NASA's most powerful supercomputers. Today is a really interesting day to have this podcast because I don't know if you guys had heard that the Nobel Prize in Physics was announced today.
Yes.
And it went to two gentlemen, both who are very accomplished, but maybe mostly known for their work in artificial intelligence above all other things. Could imagine that 2029 will have some really awesome tech. I don't know if it would be agentic and would fall under my I'll know it when I see it definition of AGI at that point. But
welcome to Humanity Unchained, a show about the future of life reshaped by artificial intelligence. From practical insights on upskilling to existential talks about immortality, no topic is off limits. Welcome to the future with your hosts, Julia McCoy and Jeff Joyce.
Welcome back to Humanity Unchained. I'm your host, Julia McCoy, with my co-host,
Jeff Joyce.
And we are here with Kyle Kabasares, who is, he's amazing. First of all, I think you may know him from his reaction to seeing O1 Reasoning, the new AI model in ChatGPT, do a year of his PhD coding work in just a few minutes. But before that, I just want to intro you a little bit, Kyle. You're a data scientist for the Bay Area Environmental Research Institute, and you're a physics PhD. You're also a YouTube partner, and you're currently working, as mentioned, as a data scientist at the Bay Area Environmental Research Institute. But what's interesting to me is that's located within NASA. You've joined the NASA Earth Exchange collaboration, where you're going to apply machine learning and high performance computing to explore large Earth science data sets. So tell us a little bit more about what that means in layman's terms.
Sure. Yeah, I know that's a mouthful. So like you said, I'm a data scientist. I work for the NASA Earth Exchange, or a part of the NASA Earth Exchange. And the whole mission of NEX, as we call it, is to combine NASA's supercomputing power that they have at the Ames Research Center. So Ames houses some of NASA's most powerful supercomputers. And the idea is to use those supercomputing resources to tackle sort of big data challenges in the earth science domain, because with sensors like satellites in space or sensors on planes collecting data continuously now and getting better and better resolution, it's just a really big data problem in the sense that we're collecting a lot of data, but it's very difficult to process that data, interpret that data, make it usable to people who may need it, like policymakers, lawmakers, people who might be interested in, like, I don't know, urban planning or construction or disaster relief. Those are, I think, important uses of the data. And my role is to try and use both supercomputing as well as machine learning techniques to create data that is usable and will be productive for the people who really need to have it in their hands.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, to kick off the conversation, if you aren't aware, I referenced earlier that Kyle is somewhat famous on the internet. So instead of putting it in my words, we're going to go ahead and play this clip, which you may have heard before. Here it goes.
This guy was shocked when the new AI recreated a year of his PhD coding work.
Will it work? No chance. No way. What line are you in? 208.
Oh my god, it ran! And this is only the preview model, the full model.
Okay.
There we go. So Kyle, let's dive a little deeper into that. Jeff,
I'm curious. So what you were working on, and was it actually a year worth of work? What exactly was that?
Yes. So let me say that I did make a follow-up video to explain a little bit more of the nuances and the caveats to that. And so one nuance is that it wasn't fully a year. It was closer to like 9.5 months to 10 months. So rounds up to a year. That year was also filled with other activities as well. So I wasn't just working on that. I was also a graduate teaching assistant. So I was teaching classes. I was also trying to do my research. And in addition to that, so I was doing the coding, I was doing the teaching. Also was kind of going through like a health problem at the time that was like a year-long thing. So was in and out of appointments like every week. And so I definitely took way longer than I think I normally would have if I just didn't have those extracurricular things going on behind the scenes. But what the code was supposed to do was that effectively my dissertation was focused on using telescope data from this radio telescope that's in Chile and using the Hubble Space Telescope together to measure how massive certain supermassive black holes are that reside in the centers of really large galaxies. And so my code was essentially supposed to create a physical model of the environment that these black holes live in effectively. And by looking at how fast this gas is rotating around the supermassive black hole, you can work out an estimate of how massive the black hole must be just using Newton's laws of gravitation. And so that's basically what the code did. But I do also want to mention, I did mention this in the follow-up video, that people have been saying, oh, your GitHub is public, everything was trained, everything was there for it to be trained on, which is true. And I would also like to point out that codes like these have existed on the internet in the astronomy community since the 90s. So it's not like mine was necessarily super unique. It was just more of like a extension or an evolution of things that have already existed. And I was simply just modifying somewhat already existing frameworks, though I did code it from scratch to accomplish this task.
Were
Still
you
super impressive. I think that it's like, and the reaction says it all. What kind of was the biggest aha that you got from that?
Well, so here's the thing. The code, what it created, and I will say that it did run, and it did effectively do what I asked, in the sense that it didn't have access to any real data that I was using for my PhD. I asked it to just create some synthetic data that it could just make sure it could run from start to finish, and it did do that. So the main reaction that I had was just kind of the realization that, oh my gosh, like if I had this in 2018 and 2019, I wouldn't have spent 9.5 months doing this. And it's not that it did it flawlessly on the first try. I mean, it did take about 6 or 7 prompts. And that was like, I think I said before I got to that point in the clip you showed, I think I even said, all right, that's it, guys. This is my last try. Like, I'm tired. I'm tired of prompting this. Like, it can't do it. I was kind of hating on it. So, I wanted to give it one last chance. And I think the fact that I was able to go from start to finish, because I had a hard time getting my code to run, because for one thing, people didn't know about this, but I had never actually coded in that language before. This was actually the very first thing I was ever given to code in this language. I suddenly lied to my PhD advisor when he asked, so you're going to be coding this framework in Python. You know Python, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I've opened the terminal of it once, I think. So that's also probably why it took so long, because I didn't have any prior experience with it.
I do also want you to, first off, if you could shout out your YouTube channel, because I do want to talk about some of your other content too.
Sure.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, my YouTube channel is just my name, actually. So it's just Kyle Kabasares. If you search that on YouTube, it'll come up immediately.
I was going through your channel, and I recently saw, actually today, and I saw some videos of you trying to get the new voice model to sing with you.
That was cool.
Yeah.
I saw it too.
Yeah, it was really entertaining to watch. And it's funny that you blew up for that first clip, but not blowing up for the clips that are actually like super funny. That I think that just even try to get it to actually sing with you, it's a funny experience to go down. So it's interesting that clip blew up, the reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the singing thing, I mean, I like music, and so I'm just naturally curious. And I know it's not like a Shazam thing that it can just tell me what song it is, but I was just kind of curious to see what it would say. And I'm just a very naturally curious person. And so when these tools like O1 Preview and O1 Mini and then Advanced Voice came out, I was just thinking, I already came up with like things, I'd like you to try to do this. Like, could it do this? And I had my YouTube channel. I've had my YouTube channel for 6 years. And so I just figured this could be kind of like fun new content that I'll try on my channel and see how it goes. And I'm happy to see that it's been received very well.
Well, you hit the timing too perfectly. I remember, I think the first time I saw your reaction was through Wes Roth's channel.
Mm.
And it was like, oh my gosh, like you were his entire hook, the way he styled the thumbnail, everything. And so I was like, oh, when somebody like that picks this up, you hit a trend before it was a trend. So like you were like one of the first people to test the O1 reasoning model and go, hey guys, look what it's capable of. Like it can do almost a year of work. Sure, it was 9 months. Maybe you could have done it faster, but it did all of that work in like, what was it, 3 to 4 prompts? You were getting frustrated with it, but you only prompted it 3 or 4 times to then get
just
that
5 or
end
6, but
result.
still, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
That's insane. So I
Like
can
I'd
see
rather,
why.
yeah, I would rather have spent, if I had that in 2018, right, like 5 or 6 prompts for an hour I would definitely trade that for over 9.5 months of frustration and banging my head against the wall, like why is this code not working, kind of thing. So I think that's mostly where the reactions come from. It's just like, man, all that work, and it could have actually been done much sooner, but it didn't exist back then, right? So I guess in a way, I do feel like still proud that I was able to do it eventually.
AI is amazing. I mean, Jeff and I, we work full time in it, have since early 2023. I sold a human writing agency that I ran for 10 years, and that was like hard manual labor. And now the fact that AI can do it, like I don't have any pitchfork. I'm like, yes, please take the hard hustle that I didn't like anyway.
Yeah,
Make our lives better.
I agreed.
How do you feel?
Today is a really interesting day to have this podcast, because I don't know if you guys had heard that the Nobel Prize in Physics was announced today.
Yes.
And it went to 2 gentlemen, both who are very accomplished, but maybe mostly known for their work in artificial intelligence above all other things. One of them, I believe, John Hopfield, actually does have a physics background and did do a lot of things in physics, but it does seem that the reason why he's getting this award is for the artificial intelligence stuff. And so I actually made a video this morning just when I woke up, because I just woke up and I was scrolling my phone and I saw on the news and I was like, huh, Jeff Hinton won the Nobel Prize in Physics? I was like, what? And I could already see, like, I already knew it was going to be a big controversial thing on Twitter, because because they're going to be like, what the heck? Like, why is he getting the Nobel Prize in Physics? He's not even a real physicist, and so I'm still actually processing that. But it's truly, I think it just speaks to our times right now, honestly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I haven't had a chance to dive into it yet, but I have seen a lot of like clickbait titles on YouTube already with people saying like, well, I guess AI is physics now. And it's like,
yes.
Oh, I mean,
yeah,
kind of, I guess. All right.
There are a lot of interesting connections between physics and artificial intelligence. Some of the earliest artificial intelligence researchers, like, for example, Claude Shannon or Alan Turing, they had a lot of connections to the physicists of their day to have conversations with. And so there's definitely a connection or a relationship between the AI and the physics community, at least subtly. But I've always sort of seen them more of as a standalone, two sort of independent fields. But now I think nowadays science is becoming more and more interdisciplinary, and of course fields like physics or biology or chemistry, medicine are applying artificial intelligence in so many different ways that those lines get kind of blurred, right?
Well, it seems like anyone with an internet connection can call themselves a scientist lately too. So there's been so many. Well, I started my YouTube channel on AI, but I waited till I had a year of working in AI to even start talking about it. And it's just funny what I see crop up on YouTube. And I mean, you're an actual, data scientist, PhD graduate. So I'm curious your thoughts on just a lot of opinions out there that seem enabled by the internet and X, where it's like, wait a minute, is that an actual verifiable fact about AI safety, or is it just an opinion?
Right. Yes. So I agree with you that there's been a lot of clickbait and maybe hype on the internet, either on X or on YouTube. And it's hard to disseminate at times, and not to even mention the whole AI generated images and videos and those kinds of things. I actually remember having a conversation with a friend of mine in 2020 or 2021. This was right after the last general election. I'm not going to talk about politics, but I'm just going to say that I told him back then, I was like, I could see AI really coming into play for the 2024 election in many different ways, good and bad. And I I don't want to call myself a prophet, but I was like, yeah, I think I called it, but that was probably easy to see. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think that for my YouTube channel, I'm trying to bring somewhat of like a reasonable, nuanced, and somewhat skeptical take on the performance of these models. And so, for example, last night I gave O1 Preview this very difficult math exam that is given every year to college undergraduates who study mathematics. And I gave it the most recent one because the most recent one came out after the knowledge cutoff for O1. So this was out of its training distribution. And I just wanted to see, like, okay, here's a really, really hard math exam. I know for a fact it's not in its training data. Could it do better than the best college math undergraduates in the world? And last night when I did this stream, it took about 2 hours, but I went through the whole test with it. I might actually do it again because it wasn't very consistent with the prompting, but nevertheless, it scored. It sounds like a really bad score, but it scored a 49 out of 120, or like a 48 out of 120, which sounds terrible. But the average student who takes that exam scores like, I mean, not the average, I think the median. The median student scores like a 10 out of 120.
Wow.
So the fact that this O1 preview model scored a 49, which I think it put it in the top, close to the top 100 out of 4,000 text takers. I was thoroughly impressed. So, but I'm trying to be very careful to not spread misinformation or overblow what these things can really do. Like I wouldn't trust O1 Preview in a robotic body to drive my car, for example, right? I wouldn't trust it to maybe do my taxes completely right. Like I probably wouldn't want it. I would probably still use my TurboTax, right, to do that. So there are many things that I think that it's very useful for, and I find it useful to solve some of the scientific problems that I'm running into, but not in the sense that it's doing actual research, but more like I have a problem, like I have data here, right? I have a lot of data. I have this idea of what I want to do with the data, and I have these mathematical transformations I want to apply to the data. The data is spread across these different folders and directories in this computer. I need to write some code that will execute these steps in a very specific order. And I can give, Claude, or I can give Open AI's O1 models that prompt, and it can give me something that more or less will do what I want. We'll need some refining, but saves me a ton of time, right? So I think that's kind of where we're at, where it's perhaps not replacing scientists, but augmenting scientists' abilities to get more done quickly. And like you said, Julia, just sort of getting away with some of that monotony, right? Because most of the day-to-day work in doing science is kind of boring. It's not that exciting. There is a lot of tedious, like looking around your computer, trying to get the right files, having 200 tabs open, and just it's just a lot. So it's nice to have these tools that expedite the scientific process.
I'd love to pick into your brain about where you think all this could be going. The big looming term is AGI. So Ray Kurzweil, I'm sure you're familiar with his work.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I am familiar. I wanted to try and finish the Singularity is Near before Singularity is Near came out. I unfortunately was not able to do that, but I've sort of skimmed both books and have read summaries of both books. So I'm only about like halfway through Singularity is Near, because I'm a kind of person who needs context. Like I don't like watching a movie series out of order. So like I won't watch like the third movie if it's coming out in theater. If I haven't seen the previous two, I have to watch the other two before I see that movie in theater. So like with books, I need to read the first book in his series before the second. And so, yeah, I mean, in terms of AGI, Kurzweil, I think, says a lot of interesting things that so far have panned out to be more or less accurate. Like his law of accelerating returns, I think, is a really interesting idea that so far it seems to be spot on. I would say that we are sort of seeing this exponential growth of computational ability and the capabilities of our technological, machines and outputs. AGI is such a broad term in a sense, right? Because
Mm.
it's hard to say, like, can it do everything as good as a human? Like I said, like right now, like last night, it can do this really hard math exam better than most humans on Earth. But then I won't trust it to do certain things like taxes or driving my car, right? And so I guess what I'm maybe skeptical of, but not going to completely shut down the idea of, is that with time and a few more scientific innovations, I could very well see machines, replacing large sectors of the workforce, right? So like I was thinking the other day, just like, wow, like, we have a lot of human labor and people who have to do really dangerous jobs, right? Like climbing into places that are dangerous, or working in hazardous environments. And I was thinking, I don't think it would be that far away to envision like having robots that have really well programmed AI models in their robotic brain doing those things, right? I mean, if you look at things or organizations like Boston Dynamics and see the robotic models they've been developing, I've been trying to think of how they the tools they're building and the models they're building can really help the average worker or the average company. But of course, that comes with some consequences, right? In terms of what do we do with all those workers?
Very true.
Do you feel that AGI, one, has to be agentic, and that it has to also be embodied in order for it to be considered true AGI? Or do you think that AGI is just a general knowledge level?
That's a really good question that I truthfully haven't spent a lot of time thinking about. But in my head, when I've envisioned AGI, it's the first one where it's agentic and has some sort of robotic form to it that is kind of doing day-to-day things. General knowledge, I think, could also be a criteria, though I think, at least in my head, I like to think of it as something that can completely, almost, I don't want to say do away with the human, but just do most things that humans have to do but don't want to do, right? So I think it embodying some sort of robotic form with agentic capabilities is closer to where I'm leaning versus general knowledge.
Yeah, there's so
What
many
about-
definitions.
Sorry, go ahead, Julia.
I was just gonna say there's so many definitions. I feel like it's just a gray lane right now, and the more voices add opinions, the grayer it gets.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not a traditional computer scientist or AI researcher, so I don't have maybe that historical knowledge and that history of what AI means to some of the long-term people in the field and how they envision it. Most of my experiences with AI has been through like science fiction, right? Through like the movies and books, right? And so I think that the fact that we're even talking about this, though, I think says something, right? The fact that we're even like considering the possibility of what this technology could do for us suggests that we're closer than we've ever been. And I think we're only going to get closer and closer to whatever, the definition of AGI really is. It could be like that case where someone who said it was some Supreme Court justice says, I can't like fully describe it, but I'll know it when I see it. I feel like it's going to be that kind of thing. Like I'll know it when I see it. And I'm like, yep, that's it. That's AGI. And I feel like the reactions I've had in some of the videos and streams I've done, I feel like it's me getting a really small glimpse of like what is possible. And that's why I'm having those kinds of reactions. It's like, oh my goodness, like it can do these like really complicated math questions and physics questions and help me with my research. And, I do see a hallucination here and there fairly often, at least when I'm doing my tests. So it does remind me like, okay, it's not quite there because I see it messing up, but it's not to the point where I don't think that it's not useful. I was actually at the dev day and I was talking to some of the OpenAI employees and I was just telling them, look, if you just paused everything right now, which they're not going to do, of course, but if you just paused everything right now and you just left us with O1 for the rest of humanity, I think a lot of humanity would benefit greatly from that, right? And of course, they're not going to stop. But I think that this is such a powerful technology that I'm surprised at maybe how little it's discussed as much as I thought it would have been. Not to say that there aren't voices like, of course, yours, Julia, and Wes, and other channels out there that are promoting it, but I'm surprised at how maybe just the common person on the street is familiar or unfamiliar with these tools.
That's very true.
It shocks me that there's still people, when you say like ChatGPT, they go, "What's that?" Like whenever I see a person like that, I'm just like, what? It feels like everybody on the planet knows about AI and ChatGPT, but to be honest, like we're in a bubble when it comes to that type of information. I think that most of the population actually doesn't know or use or talk about AI that often.
Yeah, actually, my first introduction, of course, to all this was ChatGPT back in November of, I think, 2022, right? And I was still in school at that time, and I was I was close to the end of my PhD, and I had a friend who was or is a writing lecturer at my school at UC Irvine, and immediately I thought, oh no, like if these LLMs like this, and this was ChatGPT 3.5, like this was like the very first model, and we were like playing with it. We're like, okay, give it a question from like your creative writing class and see how well it could write, you know, an essay on, I think he was doing the movie Beauty and the Beast, right? Or something like, yeah, what is a question you'd ask your students about the movie Beauty and the Beast to write about, and see how well it would do. And ChatGPT 3.5 was producing like, not like stellar essays, but essays that would have passed his class, you know, like it wouldn't have failed. Like it would have done better than not most, but you know, the average student. And so I already kind of saw the writing on the wall where I was like, I'm kind of happy I'm not going to have to deal with this problem in education anymore. Because like I knew I didn't want to stay in the academic system, but I was already like, oh boy, like you guys are going to have a hard time with this, like with students having access to this.
Yeah, it's funny because in our work, Jeff and I, we work at Branwell, and Branwell was Consonant Scale. We rebranded this August. One of the first things that launched with it, it launched a few months before ChatGPT came out in September of 2022, and it launched one of the first AI detectors. So it was like this catch-22, right, where we saw millions of scans per month, and a lot of those were from students. And then they were seeing, okay, what is a robotic sounding sentence? And then what we learned in all of that was really interesting, where, you know, we were doing education, Jeff and I, a lot of video content, and it was really eye-opening to me to realize, okay, an AI detector and any kind of detective technology here that's built to know and tell you a score doesn't actually know that this is written by AI. It's just predicting a robotic sounding sentence. So it's almost like it was forcing, whenever you get that output and you run it through detector and it's like, oh, this is 98% robotic, and you know you got to do something, which is kind of the pathway of a lot of agencies, marketers, and then students today. It's forcing us, I think, to almost become better writers than we would be without it, because we have to know how to avoid the robotic trap. And a lot of writers in my writing agency days, like they all wrote like robots, and back then an AI detector would have said they were robotic. So it's interesting, like the time old problems are coming back up, but through AI, and it's like we can actually build better solutions because AI itself is almost just like a leg up. But going back to that AGI question, you know, it's interesting. Kurzweil puts an actual date on AGI of 2029. Would you say that that's possible?
Well, you know, if his law of accelerating returns holds, and I don't want to claim it's a law of nature, but I mean empirically it seems to be holding up pretty well in terms of what AI models and just technology's progression over the years has looked like. You know, I think as humans, we're just so not used to thinking in sort of exponential growth terms. We're so used to sort of linear decision making and linear timescales that it's really hard for us to extrapolate and get a good guess as to when things will happen. I mean, I think, Julia, you were referencing in a few videos of yours, I saw that there was that study of AI researchers. I think it was, I forgot what year it was, 2017 or 2023, I can't remember. Or I think it was after GPT-3 came out, I think, and they had predicted that it would take 50 or 100 years for GPT-4 to come out,
Yes,
right?
correct. Yep.
And so that's a great example, I think, of even, people who are knowledgeable in this space not having a great grasp
Mm,
of exponentially growing technology. And so, 50 years versus 3 years, I guess, or 2 years. I don't remember how quick that was, right? So,
yeah.
um, and the thing about exponential curves is that they just keep spiraling
Yeah.
faster and faster. So 2029 seems like a long time away, but with a long time, it's kind of like compound interest, right? It's just like your bank account at the beginning when you're compounding doesn't seem maybe that nice to look at, but give it a few decades and it's like, you're really bringing it home the big bucks. So I could imagine that 2029 will have some really awesome tech. I don't know if it would be agentic and would fall under my I'll know it when I see it definition of AGI at that point. But I'm excited nonetheless. And I think that to bet against Kurzweil, I think you're betting at your own risk. So,
Mm,
that's
yeah.
that's what I think.
Today I heard a really interesting quote from John McCarthy, who's known as the guy who like created the term artificial intelligence back in the 50s,
Mhm.
computer scientist, cognitive scientist. And he said he was actually asked in the 50s, when do you see like AGI or ASI coming? And he said, at any given moment, it will be anywhere from 5 to 500 years away.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because in science, actually, working in astronomy, that kind of range is actually quite acceptable for certain kinds of measurements. Because, like, for example, like if you want to know, for example, when a star is going to explode, you could probably put a good estimate to within the nearest million years. But you're not
Mm.
going to be able to say that star is going to explode tomorrow or in a week. We don't have that precise of a clock to sort of measure those kinds of things. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, that's a very large range on human life scales, 5 to 500 years. But I think sometimes it helps to remember that it took a long time for us to even get to where we are now in terms of human civilization. And honestly, we're quite young on the world stage in terms of how long
Yeah.
we've been on this planet and how long we've been, quote unquote, dominating it as the, you know, uh, alpha species, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Very true.
So earlier you were talking about things that you wouldn't let like a AI model do for you.
Mhm.
Is there anything, provided that the AI model is like at AGI levels, where it has general knowledge of everything, it's agentic, it's embodied? Is there anything that you wouldn't want AI to do for you?
Oh man, anything I wouldn't want to, if it was like AGI to the point that I accepted it as an AGI, and what I wouldn't want it to do. Oh man, I feel like there's like a couple of answers there, but I feel like they're going to fall flat in the sense that I don't know. There are some things that humans do that I feel like I would rather watch humans doing than computers
Mm.
or robotic, AGIs doing. For example, actually a good example of this, for example, is like chess. I'm a big fan of chess. The best chess playing beings or they're machines, right? In the world are machines. They're computers, right? But I wouldn't pay money to go to
Mm.
a chess match to see, Alpha Chess or Alpha Zero versus Stockfish, the chess engines, right? I want to go see my Magnus Carlsen's versus Hikaru Nakamura's playing chess, right?
Yeah.
So I think sports is probably a good place where, I think sports helps us remember that, there is human exceptionalism, and that I think as a caveat to that, though, I do think, for example, one exciting promise of AGI or the technology that comes from it is that giving people who maybe did not have the physical abilities to do certain things the ability to do those things moving forward. Like, for example, when I think of myself, for example, I had a really bad injury in 2018, and so I no longer play really high impact sports, and so I would love to have some sort of technology that could, effectively guarantee that if I got hurt, I could, regrow some tissue or cartilage or ligaments or muscles, right? And I could do that very quickly, right? Not, wait dozens of years for that technology. So I do think like sports is probably a good place where I'd want to see humans sort of reign supreme, and other things too, like maybe in the arts. Like for example, if I want to see, I don't know, like a play or like dance or something, you know, I think I'd rather see humans do that personally.
What about like a doctor?
Oh, good question. This is, I feel like, a very hot take because I know that there was a recent, I forgot where it was, but I saw some recent thing on X where doctors, there was like a study that did like doctors with GPT-4, and then just like GPT-4 trying to diagnose certain cases. And it seemed to me that the doctors with GPT-4, I can't remember if they did better or worse than just GPT-4 or 4.0 alone. But, and I'm also very biased with this because I've been in and out of hospitals for the past year because of various health things. And so I have a very maybe jaded view of the American healthcare system, as I think a lot of people might. And so if you tell me there's a potential solution where there is a fully artificial general intelligent doctor that doesn't get tired, that doesn't forget certain details about me, that doesn't, I don't know, make me feel like I'm an idiot for coming into this office and stuff like that, then I'd be mostly for it personally. But that's just because I've had some bad experiences with real human doctors.
Well, that is a great example, you know, and the argument I've heard is better, faster, safer, cheaper. If you had, specifically to doctors, if you had a doctor who was like prone to error, let's say 5% of his patients died right there on the table during surgery, but you know this robot doctor has a 1% chance of that, and that robot doctor is, because it's robotics and it's not human, demanding salary bumps and this and that, and tired and hungry, like you said, or forgets information about you. And the end cost of that was far lower to you, and the end result was greater, which means better, faster, safer, cheaper. Like, you would always pick the robotic direction. I think it's like a lot of people are like, well, I don't know if I would trust the robot, but they're not thinking of it correctly. Like, if it's better, faster, safer, cheaper, yeah, you would. You can't tell me you wouldn't, because then you just be wasting money.
There's a good example of this when I was at Dev Day. I met someone who was telling me about they're a mother and they have 2 kids who are getting to the point where they're going to be taking the bus to go to school by themselves, like the public transit here in the Bay Area. And I grew up in the Bay Area, so I was just giving her some, you know, my own experience of taking the bus. And I was telling her there was this article of how parents are using Waymo driverless cars to just put their kids in the car and then send them off to school. And
wow,
to me, I was kind of like, and I don't have kids, so, but you know, to me, I was like, whoa, like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, if I just put my kid in a car with no driver. But then I talked to this mother, and she said, you know, I would rather trust a driverless Waymo than a complete stranger to drive my kid who I don't know. And I was like, that's a fair point. I didn't even consider it. I'm like, yeah, I mean, we grew up, at least I grew up in the age of stranger danger, right? Don't get into to cars of people you don't know. So when she brought that up, I was like, you know what? Maybe I would put my kid in a driverless Waymo. So
yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Well, as we wrap up, let me go ahead and one more time. Here it goes.
Recreated a year of his PhD coding work.
Will it work? No chance. No way. What line are you in? 208.
Oh my God, it ran!
Oh boy.
There we go.
Hopefully you don't have to. Yeah, hopefully you don't have to see that anymore.
Oh, I probably will, but it's
Play
okay.
it one more time.
I was like, oh no.
Well, any last questions, Jeff, we should wrap up with here with Kyle?
Nope. I was going to go on a whole tirade about healthcare and AI, but I think that I'll save that because we'll be here for another half an hour.
Sounds like fair enough.
Kyle, it was awesome having you on.
Yeah,
I hope that people check out your YouTube channel. I think that you're very entertaining, and I think that you have a lot of good insights. And so, if you want to shout out your channel one more time, so people can know where to find you.
Oh yeah, so just my name, Kyle Kabasares on YouTube. It's the only channel I think with my name there. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for inviting me, both of you. It was a pleasure to talk to you both. I'm really honored to be on the show. Honestly, I'm very new to the scene. Honestly, it was mid-September when I kind of really thought maybe AI would be a great direction to take my channel into, and so I feel very happy to be in the space now. And I've been consuming a lot of AI content from different creators, of course yours too, Julia. And so I'm excited. I think it's exciting to be where we are, and I'm excited where we're going to go.
Same. Well, it was interesting to me. Somebody commented on a post I did. I think it was a community post on my channel about David Shapiro quit AI. That made a lot of people started talking about that, and so people started commenting on my channel about the people I should collaborate with, and you were one of the suggestions.
Oh,
So yeah, they were like,
thank you, that person.
with Kyle. Yeah, so shout out to my YouTube viewers for recommending Kyle. Yeah, this has been a great chat. I echo what Jeff said. Lots of knowledge. I think sometimes like young voices are almost more refreshing to hear than older ones that are a little bit more jaded, or there's less hope and optimism and just like a perception of point of view that's fresh. So I really appreciate that you bring that, and never hold your age against yourself. I think if anything, that's a strength that you bring to artificial intelligence.
Well, thank you. I do get told I am young and I look young all the time. So
so that is a compliment.
I think so.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you again.
Be sure to follow Kyle on his YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this on audio, if you haven't subscribed, Humanity Unchained is streaming on every podcast platform. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, Humanity Unchained. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everybody.